I'm Misty Martinez-Mohanan, and I'm representing Franklin PTC.
I'm Kirsten Favorite-Smith, and I represent Fuller FSA.
I am Becky Russell, and I represent the JDA here at Jonathan Daniels.
Jennifer Masterson, Milan School BTA.
And we would like to welcome our candidates this evening. Thank you very much for joining us this evening and giving us all the opportunity to get to know you. And Kathy O'Donnell, thank you so much for being our facilitator this evening. We
You're very
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we're going to stick with a strict time schedule. We're asking the candidates to answer questions in 2 minutes, just so that we can ask as many questions as possible and squeeze in as much in the next hour and a half as we can. So we'll turn it over to Kathy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So welcome to everybody here tonight, and welcome to all the candidates for number one vote. Thank you. Is everybody here? Was it out? Hello? Yeah. Okay, yay. So we have a lot of material that we'd like to cover tonight, so we'd like all the candidates to be a bit succinct, but get to the point of what they'd like to talk about. And I thank everybody for coming tonight, and also for stepping forward to serving on, possibly serving on the Board of Education in Keene. So the first part is that we'd like each candidate to please introduce yourself, tell us why you're running for the school board. And we'll start, I guess, with John.
Hello, my name is John Bonet. I've lived in Keene for the last 26 years. My daughter had a very good education in the Keene school system. And I'm running because I want there to be a good public school for children in this community. We owe it to them. The future is governed by what they learn in their schools. The most important, probably the most important thing in their lives, the first 18 years, is probably education.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kris Roberts. I am a Keene kid. I went to Lincoln School, which is now Waldorf School on Lincoln Street. I went to Keene Middle School, Keene High School. My wife, who I took to the 8th grade prom at Keene Middle School, or 8th grade dance, we weren't allowed to say it back then, went to Fuller School and to Keene Middle School and Keene High School. And my daughter went to all the schools. I was raised in a home environment where my mother was a teacher at Simon School for 24 years, a 2nd grade teacher. I watched, I always get irritated when people say that the teachers take the summers off. That's just not true. My mom worked nights, and she worked weekends, and she worked summers, and she tutored most of the time for free to ensure that those kids were able to get the education they were supposed to. So I have great regard for that. My dad was a 9-year member of the Keene School Board and taught us early on to give back to our community.
Kris, I just want to say, we have Jen's keeping track of the time, and we're over 2 minutes.
Oh,
so she's going to hold it up when there's 15 seconds left. Just look over to Jen.
So my 2 minutes starting over? I'll get the other stuff in later on, hopefully. Okay?
Thank you. It's hard with 8 people to get everything in.
Hi, I'm Susan Freitas. I've worked in Keene as a school counselor for 12 years. I've personally experienced the quality education that's existed here for 10 years. I've witnessed firsthand the intelligence, talent, creativity, work ethic, and infinite capacity to care about children that define Keene teachers. I've worked with and noted many dedicated parents who are positively engaged with our school communities. If I'm elected to the board, I will bring the passion and perspectives of these stakeholders to the board's work. Dedicated parents and teachers, eyes are always focused on what's best for children, are the core of education. When we value their experience and wisdom and give them a voice, we can make a difference. I've also attended almost every Keene School Board and Committee meeting that's occurred during the past 14 months. I've done my homework. I'm well informed about the issues that face the board.
Hi, I'm Ian Freeman. I host a talk show in town. It's nationally syndicated called Free Talk Live. I'm also the executive producer of a feature film called Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, which you can see for free at victimlesscrimespree.com. I'm running because I think that education is really important. In fact, I think it's too important to be handled by a monopoly, which it currently is. The government is basically a near monopoly. Yeah, you can choose to send your kids to a private school or homeschool, but ultimately what you can't do is choose where to send the money that's currently being allocated to this one-size-fits-all system. So I'd like to see decentralization being brought to education, meaning that the teachers and the staff at each school should be the owners of that school, and they should be able to set their own policy, should be able to set their own curriculum, rather than having to go through the state government or, you know, a school board or something like that. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Daryl W. Perry. I'm the owner and managing editor of Free Press Publications, which is a book publishing company, also put out a monthly newspaper, and I host a weekly radio show called Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I'm fairly new to Keene, and when I got here and I saw the tax rates, I knew that something had to be done. And I looked at the past school budgets and see that the school budget keeps going up and up and up, and the tax rate keeps going up and up and up, and that parents keep having less and less control over the education that their children receive. So that's why I'm running for school board. I want to give parents more control over the education that their children receive, instead of the bureaucratic sort of top-down education that they currently get through the school board.
Hello everyone, I'm Don Parker, and I've lived over on Laurel Lane around the corner here since 1970, and my children came here to this school. Can you hear me now? It's like a TV commercial. Can you hear me now? I said I live at Laurel Lane since 1970, and my children came to this school. So I'm a long-time Keene resident and a real member of the Daniels community, I think. I'm running now because I've looked out and I see a lot happening, are going to happen, and I think it's a very exciting time for us. Some can call it a challenge. I think it's exciting. The Common Core, as you know, is going to be going in. We're faced with economic challenges. Students are changing the way they learn, and I'm just dumb enough to think that I have the experience and background to be helpful with all that. I was on the Keene board from 2000 to 2010 and helped get the new middle school. I have been a teacher in a public school for 9 years teaching English. I was the former director of admissions at Keene State, former Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at New England College, the former Associate Vice President of New England College, and now I'm in the admissions office at Marlborough College Graduate School. I've been all over the United States seeing schools, and I think I can bring back my experiences and my knowledge to help not only the board, but the administration, you parents, and the kids in these schools, and I'm anxious to get going on it. Thank you.
My name is Kris Roberts. I'm running for the school board, and the reason I'm running is because I think education is extremely important. My mother only had a 9th grade education, and her husband had a 4th grade education, and I was able to retire as a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and accomplished a number of other things because of the quality of the education that I got out of public schools. I think public schools are extremely important, but I also have to look at some of the things that are happening with the federal government, the state government, and my thing is I've always been a visionary, and sometimes it gets me in trouble because a lot of times in government you look at what's going to happen today. And so I want to see improvements for today, but not at the cost of selling out our future. So it's going to take a fine balance, and so far the Keene School Board has been able to do that on the 9 years that I've been on the school board, and hopefully I'll be able to help them do it again for the next 3 years.
Thank you. My name is Conan Soliday. My daughter and I just moved here early last year. We're originally from Florida, so this is it's been a bit of a shock for us. Actually, more of a shock for her. I like the cold. But I love Keene. There are a lot of things here in Keene that I really like, but there are a couple of things that really bother me, and the biggest one is the school system. I'm running for school board because I'm disappointed with the lack of options available to both the parents and students. And I'm unhappy with the cookie cutter, one-size-fits-all government school option that we as a community are forced to pay for, whether we agree with what's going on or not. And I'm deeply concerned with the growing cost of tuition and the subsequent tax burden that is inflicted upon the residents. I'm running for school board to offer the community another alternative than just throw more money at it solution that clearly doesn't work and never will.
Thank you. There are several questions I'm going to be addressing as well that were given to me from the PTAs. The first one would be, given all that has happened, redistricting has been a big issue, the closing of this school has been an issue. What are your positions on the two issues in terms of whether there should be a school closure and also what should happen subsequently with redistricting in a greater picture? I guess start off with Kris Roberts.
Well, I guess I would have to go by my votes, and I have supported repurposing this school, and it came after, well, first of all, I'm a kid that had a school closed, so I understand the pain of what a lot of people are looking at. But at the same time, we had to take a look at where enrollment is today and where it's going to be tomorrow and make a hard decision. And we led it to the experts then to tell us how to go about that. At the same time, though, when they took a look at narrow grade span and wide grade span, I was clearly in the camp of not going away from the values that I grew up by, and that is the neighborhood school. And so I worked very hard to make sure that the people that on the board that were voting that where I stood, because I felt it was important for us to, if you go to narrow grade span, you're closing 5 schools, in my mind. You're not closing 1 school, because you're changing the way we know what we know. And I felt it was real important for the kids to have the same opportunity that I did at Lincoln growing up and having that neighborhood feel to it. I mean, I went to school at a time when you went home for lunch, and you just with a neighborhood feel, and we have to have some type of tradition that we stand for, and I just felt when that was in place. But I do feel like the economics times and the enrollment numbers that we're looking at, we had to make some hard decisions. Am I happy about it? Not at all. But you have to. I'm looking. I just remembered 2 minutes. 10 seconds. 15. And 15 is even it's hard to get it in, but that's okay. I'll let you guys talk about it, and I'll add more later.
I'd like to see us take a fresh look at both issues. I think we need to develop a process that solicits ongoing input from educators in the community, and we need to build consensus based on this input. I also think we need new numbers. Those of us who were skeptical about the cost savings projected in the original plan were proven correct. The cost of the plan was double the amount projected, 16 million instead of 18 million. And the plan probably would not have saved the district much money. I think we need to also think in terms of long-range planning for a decade, and we need to align our thinking with the overall development goals for the city. I've heard several questions raised that might be helpful to consider. Would it be prudent to pilot renovations to 1 elementary school next year so we can pin down specific costs and get reliable numbers? Would it be more cost efficient in the long run to close 2 schools that could be sold and build 1 new elementary school? How much money did the district spend to patch up the old middle school before making the decision to build a new school? Is the old K-5 plan the best K-5 plan? Since the community has expressed overwhelming support for the current K-5 elementary structure, should we keep that structure intact and make the required safety improvements to our existing elementary schools slowly, 1 year at a time? These are some thoughts on that issue that I've heard expressed and seem worth considering.
In regards to restructuring and closing schools, I don't think that any school needs to be closed. I think that I want to propose again something I proposed at the district meeting recently that was ruled as illegal by the person who was running the meeting. And of course, it's been my observation, and any student of history would know that in the past and today, that just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it's wrong. The proposal I have is that schools should be turned over to the staff, as I mentioned briefly earlier. Teachers, administrators, the janitor, everybody should get a share in the school. You've already got all the, the investments been taken care of. Turn that over to the school. So in the case of Jonathan Daniels, everybody that works here would be an owner of the school. Then they would get to decide what to do as far as running the operation. They would get to decide whether or not to sell their school or to, increase this or decrease that or whatever. That way you don't have to turn to the school board. It doesn't have to become a referendum. It doesn't have to become an issue that people fight over, minutia, constantly struggling with one another. Different interest groups of parents and teachers always fighting over a few dollars. All of that is unnecessary, but it's the nature of the centralized school system that we have today. And there's plenty of examples that centralization fails throughout the world, and so it's unfortunate that we're saddled with centralization for our schools. So decentralize.
I don't think that it should be a school board decision whether or not a certain school building remains operational or not. I believe that parents should have a say, and parents should be allowed to choose which school they send their children to. If someone who lives next door to this school thinks that this school is not the best fit for them, they should not be arbitrarily designated to send their children to this school just because they live in a geographical area that is designated for a certain school. So I believe that parents should have much more control over where and how their children are educated than they currently have.
Well, the jury's still out on this issue, isn't it? First, we learned that we might save some money by closing a school. And so we took that straw ballot on closing Daniels, and it got turned down flat, if you remember correctly. So then the next idea was to not close Daniels School, but to repurpose it. So we were still going to keep the same number of elementary schools. And then to accomplish what we're going to do, we're going to bus people all over town. Then we're going to put additions onto aging schools. And I'm not trying to be critical, but I sit back and I wonder if that's the best way to operate. I've gone to meetings after meeting after meeting over the years, and I've heard repeatedly, we want to have neighborhood schools. The city stands behind it. Well, in this particular proposal, we're going to keep our neighborhood schools. The only problem is the kids in those neighborhoods aren't going to be going to them. They're going to be bused to the other side of town. But we don't have to make a decision right away. It's not on this ballot. Let's take some time to think. We need the amount this is going to cost. We need lots of questions answered about what's going to happen to the students when they change it, how they're going to be taken care of. You can go online if you wish, and you can find studies about all this, and some are supportive, and some have real red flags on them. Let's ask ourselves, while we've got breathing room, is this the best way to do it? Are there other options that can be taken care of? Let's get imaginative. Let's not rush into this. I'm not dumb enough to think we don't need to do something, but let's do the right thing. And we'll know it's the right thing when the city supports it, but frankly, the city is not supporting it now.
At times, when I was first on the school board, Keene State College used to fund most of Wheelock School. We were told that there's not enough young children in Wheelock School. You need to redistrict, else we're not going to be able to fund Wheelock School. The board at that time wasn't comfortable with redistricting, so they did not redistrict and added over $1 million a year onto the school budget because Keene State College no longer funded it. In 2002, we had a report that covered the middle school and all the 5 elementary schools, explaining everything that had to be done to fix it. Again, the board was unwilling to go to the public and say things. So we went and piecemeal different things because in both cases, the board was afraid of the public outcry because we got to do this or we got to do that. The failure of the board to address that public outcry is added millions each year onto our budget. We knew the problems of the elementary school in 2002. We knew the problems of the middle school in 2002. Now we have to look at what are we going to do. If it's $12 million and the state isn't going to pay a single penny and the city has, excuse me, all the taxpayers have to pay for the elementary schools, there's a high probability the bond will not pass. What we have not been thinking about as a board is what happens if the bond doesn't pass? Where do we get the money to fix up the school, even one school at a time? If that school costs $1 million, do we take $1 million out of this year's budget each year? There's going to be the question. We need to think what happens if it doesn't happen or what we're going to do for the future. There is no answers right now.
The student population here in Keene is definitely in decline, and it makes a lot of sense to, you know, not have whole buildings with only a small population of students in them. It makes no sense to heat this entire building for 30 or 40 kids. So, I mean, it makes sense to push the kids together, but you know, at the end of the day, it makes even more sense to hand it over to the teachers and the parents and let the parents make the decision where they want to send their kids. And if they want to have a local, if they want to pay for this building, they should be able to pay for this building, but it needs to come out of their own pocket. People on the other side of town shouldn't have to pay the consequences for people on this side of town. It makes more sense that way. But at the end of the day, it should be left up to the teachers and the parents. Centralized planners, you know, they're just going to, it just causes more problems than anything. People on one side of town are fighting people on the other side of town, and it's just too much conflict. It needs to be handed over to the parents.
Well, let me tell you, my elementary school was first through 8th, no kindergarten. It was the first 3 grades together, 4th and 5th, and the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So we had 3 classrooms. We had no PE, no music, no art, and you know, I miss those things. I wish that I had had that opportunity, but we had about 100 students in our school, so we didn't have those opportunities. As far as Jonathan Daniels, I think the board's probably made a good decision to try to repurpose it into pre-first. But I really like the idea of keeping the elementary school a full span, K through 5. For some of the reasons that the steering committee's alternate report indicated. It gives a continuity to children's early education. It gives them a feeling of a community of people. The teachers and the staff get to know those children over those 6 years. I think that's all I really have to say. Thanks.
Keene has just the Keene School District or Keene School Board just completed its recent budget process, which goes to the voters next week, the same day as the school election. What are your thoughts? There have been some cuts that have been controversial, such as the world language in 5th grade, athletic director at the high school and gifted program, as well as other cuts, many staff cuts at high school. What do you feel? What are your thoughts about the current proposed budget for the school district, and specifically, if you want to address any of those cuts? And I'll start with Cody.
As I stated in my intro, I'm very displeased with the current budget proposal. And, you know, I wanted to actually bring it down. I proposed a 10% cut, which would have amounted to a little over $6 million, which I think is very fair. 10% cut over a year when the budget has been growing. You know, everyone else since 2007 has been working around these lean years, and they've actually been cutting and making changes in their life, but not the schools. The schools have been going up every year. I think they're getting $800,000 in raises, the teachers. You know, there's a lot of people who aren't getting raises this year. And this is a problem throughout the country. It's not just Keene. The average cost of student tuition, of school tuition, has almost tripled in the last 40 years, and yet the achievement scores, the testing scores, have been flatlined for the last 40 years. There's been no change, but tuition has gone up. It's skyrocketing. It's become a bubble. It's, you know, we're all flailing and having a miserable time of it because of the housing bubble. Well, the education bubble is another type of bubble that could, you know, have disastrous effects. Keene is spending way too much money on education. And I'm not saying that I'm not for education, but you know, the schools, they have no incentive to do better. They're going to get our money, whether they do a good job or not. We have to hold the schools accountable some way or another. The only way to really do that is the money. It's all about the money. And, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to them. There's no incentive.
I personally believe a well-rounded education has art, has music, has foreign language, and I think if I had my magic wand and we could reportion the budget, it would start at kindergarten. When I've been in the military and traveling around the world and in the United States, my children have been exposed to a lot of those at a very young age. Young age, because art and music are important. Plain and simple, people know that music improves math scores. All the research shows that. And as far as the budget growing, people have to remember that $700,000 of that increase as a result of the state failing to pay its portion of the retirement, the state failing to hire good investment planners, only getting a 0.7 return on the investment, causing us to go deeper into debt at the state level. And the law says every 2 years we have to increase to help make it up, pay it up for the next 5 years. So a lot of things in the budget. There is a lot of cuts in this budget. Yes, there are some pay raises, contractual pay raises. Yes, there are step raises. Those are in the contract. But unfortunately, people are going to lose their jobs because there just isn't enough money for us to do everything that we would like to do. Gifted and talented, yes, we would like to have someone there, but we don't have the money. There comes to those hard choices. Like I said, I think the foreign language needs to go back in. It didn't go back in. And so we've got some hard cuts this year, and we're going to get some more cuts next year. We need to start planning on what we're going to save for next year.
What makes me shake my head a little bit about the budget is the way we go about it. Each year, we assume that everything is fine, and then when it comes budget time, we're told to go back and see what we might trim out of the budget. So a few sacrificial lambs are picked, those are noted, and then 90 people go to the high school and they vote them all back in. That doesn't seem to be a wise way to operate. But what we don't have, in my opinion, is a grid to work on. This community, in my opinion, needs to sit down and figure out what is really important for our education. And I'm not just talking about the 3 R's. If this is a community that talks about health, then health should be in there. It's important. If this is a community that supports the arts, then art should be in there. We put price tags on those. And then we begin to look at what would be nice to have, but does not fulfill the main mission with price tags. And in short, we build from the bottom up rather than cutting from the top down. So we fund what we really want and believe in and make sure that has the money for it. And then we gauge everything after that by how it's going to get us where we need to go. And if we have to cut something, everyone will understand why. Not because it's a sacrificial lamb, but because it didn't get us where we need to go, so it may have to wait. My other problem is we talk about cut, 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 cut. I am in favor of looking at how we're going to get some income as well. I've gone to meeting after meeting here in other communities that have the same sort of per pupil cost, but their taxes are lower. Now, I know we're not in the real estate business or the development is on the board, and I'm not laying this on the city council, but somehow this city has to look around and say, we need more clean industry here. We need it for the jobs, we need it for the people, and we need to bring them here to help them support our schools. One community, all working together to make everything stronger, I think we'll all be better off.
If one looks at the currently proposed $62.3 million budget and then breaks that down by the actual student enrollment, which based on the most recent figures that I've seen was 3,788 students, then that is roughly $17,000 per year per child. If one looks at what the school board lists as actual instructional cost, then it costs roughly $9,000 a year to actually educate a child. The other $8,000 per year per child, which comes up to just a little over $20 million, is what they call support cost. That includes, I believe it's $4.5 million for school administration. Why don't we make a cut there? Why don't we cut the support cost from the amount that is stolen from the taxpayers and have that be funded through user fees? If it's something that the parents actually want in the school, then they should pay a user fee for that service. And if it's something that the parents do not want, then it obviously is not needed, so therefore it should be cut. And those cuts should come from what they refer to as the support cost, not the actual educational cost. And if you do that, then you don't have to worry about cutting teachers if those teachers are actually needed and wanted by the parents. But if parents don't want those classes, then those should obviously be cut because then it doesn't make fiscal sense.
One of the candidates down there was talking about the things that we want as far as curriculum, classes, options for students. But that doesn't make any sense to me because we're all different. Some kids really enjoy a good math curriculum. Some enjoy sports, some enjoy arts. They don't all have the same interests. And parents also don't have the same interests. And that's why every year there's always this struggle over, well, the budget, we've got to cut the budget, and who's going to lose? Somebody always loses. You know, I think it was the gifted program that lost this time around. You know, it's always something. And then that person or that group of people that supported that program feels dejected, they feel hurt, and nobody should have to feel that way when it comes to educating students, young people, because everybody should be able to get the kind of education that they want for their kids. But the system we have today doesn't facilitate that. It's a one-size-fits-all system. Whoever wins the current battle, they win for that year, and then the next year you get to try it all over again. Why not just make it so the teachers run each school? If you don't like the school that your kids are going to, send them to a different school. If you don't like any of the choices, start your own school. We could have that freedom if we didn't have this monopoly system that is forcing itself on everybody. As was pointed out earlier, if you don't like the decisions that are made, if you don't like the curriculum, well, too bad. If you don't want to pay for it, then they might just come and take your house from you. And I think that that's the wrong way to run any kind of business or charity. Things should be done on a consensual basis, and that's what I'm advocating.
Having been to, again, every finance committee meeting almost during the past 14 months, and having been through 3 January Keene budget cycles, I don't think I could have said nearly as well as Mr. Parker did what my approach would be to budget issues. I'd like to just make a few other comments. One of the difficulties of ensuring that the Keene district is spending its money wisely is compounded by 2 factors. First, the Keene district is part of the larger SAU, and its budget for special education, technology, curriculum initiatives, and professional development are part of the larger SAU budget. These budgets are not presented in detail in the January Cost Center Keene budget book, so it's hard to pin down exactly where the money goes. For example, this year's $962,000 technology budget was a half-page long, contained only text and lacked any hard numbers. Secondly, budget work is interwoven with leadership issues. We've had significant turnover in SAU 29 leadership in the past decade, specifically in the areas of technology, curriculum, and human resources. When there is turnover, there is always the danger that initiatives introduced and pursued by an employee are lost when he or she leaves the district. This is costly. For example, the district did significant work in curriculum mapping several years ago. That work now resides on a shelf somewhere. Another example is the Halogen Teacher Evaluation software program that the district purchased several years ago, only to recently abandon it because it doesn't fit with our current system. Stable and effective leadership at the central administration level will help us spend our money wisely and efficiently.
First, core values, where this year more than ever before, when the board did its retreat, we actually mandated that we have every administrator there. This is unusual. In the past, we've had selected SAU of representation, but this time around, we asked everybody to come in, and we asked guidance counselors and assistant principals and some teachers and union to come in and to work with us to develop our goals, because we needed to know what the core value was. Out of that, I hope that continues this year. And I hope we actually take it a step further and have another meeting in September where we bring this group back together and we talk about finances. And we talk about bringing everybody together. And actually, I think last year, the one shortcoming we had teachers, we didn't have enough teachers. But I want to, if we had that opportunity, we bring that back in, because what we came out with, we all came out with a core set of values to move forward with. The cuts, the funny thing about the foreign languages, and it's not funny, is my daughter is graduating from college. She's interviewing to be a elementary school foreign language teacher. It's tough, but when we work with the principals, and I listen to the principals, and when principals come to my office even and tell me about some plans and some ideas they have about how to move forward, I have to believe in them. And that's where it's not that the board just brings up these cuts out of the blue. It's about us really listening to administrators, I think more than we have in the past, to really try to say, how do we move forward? And I think we started a learning curve this year. I'm just looking at my time. I think a learning curve this year where we thought we had some success, but it's still painful. We also know that the state doesn't give us the numbers some of the numbers we need until very late in the process. So we have to guess what it is. Again, I didn't get all the way through it, sorry.
Well, I don't know if there's any room for more cuts, but I really don't want more cuts to programs. In fact, if it were my preference, I would be adding world languages at the kindergarten and the first grade level, which is where they really need to be, because this is where children's brains are more elastic and they will pick it up faster and retain it. And that elasticity of their brain actually lasts a lifetime, and it really will help them, I think, become a better educated individual with an ability to use better abstract thinking. The days is no longer industrial or a domestic. This is a global marketplace. Our children need to be able to have the potential to speak other languages, and that is really where I think is necessary. This is not the first board I've ever tried to be on. In fact, I've been on other boards, and I've been on boards where I come in and the board is basically not working very well. And through my leadership, I've been able to turn them around. By the time I left, it became a completely different organization. I don't know if that is a potential in this particular board, because I've never worked with these people, but there is potential there. Thank you.
Shannon's hoping to keep with the time pretty well. Okay, everybody's looking at the green iPad. So I'll start with you. And if you could say one or two things that you think are working in the Keene School District, or that are successful, or however you want to define that, and a couple of things that you think could be improved.
Well, I'm going to start off by saying what I think could be improved. I think that parents could have more control over the education of their children, and I believe that education could be funded in a much better manner than it currently is. Instead of everyone living in the city being forced to pay for an education system that they aren't using, I think that the parents should pay for the education of their children. Similar to how private schools, only the parents who use that school pay, and the private schools do it at a much greater return on investment, if you will. Most private schools run somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000 a year. And as I said earlier, the actual instructional cost, according to the Board of Education, is roughly $9,000 per year per child. When you add in all of the supplemental cost, it's $17,000 per year. So do the math, and that's anywhere between 4 and almost 6 times as high as what private schools do. And parents have much greater control over the education of their children at private schools. So I think that those are things that could definitely be improved. And as far as what the Keene schools are doing right, they pay the light bills and they keep the buildings operational.
Well, I'm glad to report that I think quite a bit is going on. I'm glad to report that I think a lot is going on. It's really quite good. And I say that because I went to an education committee meeting last week, and I saw some of the latest scores for the NECAP testing, as a, the AY, I won't speak, school needs, the No Child Left Behind. Now you all know what I've seen blanks. No Child Left Behind testing. And the scores are going up and up and up and up and up in all of our elementary schools. Hooray for that. Proud of everybody's involved with that. A couple of years ago, I was very, very critical of that, as you may know, and I'm glad to report that. I think we do a terrific job for those who have what I'm going to call identified learning differences. We spend a great deal on it. We are dedicated to them. Hooray for all of that. I think in general, most students come here and get a pretty good education along the way, and some get it terrific. Out at the high school, we pushed for more and more standards for AP classes, and those were up. But what I think can still be done is, I think the coordination between the schools can be improved a bit. That somehow working in one unit and then to the next level can be seen as a transition toward that ultimate goal I was talking about, which is the finished student, if you will, the knowledge and skills they need. So let's communicate better, let's see what we can do to get the process a bit better. And then dear to my heart, since I've been tied with this publicly more than once, I would like to see more done to address the needs of very, very precocious children. Now, I'm not advocating, and never did, a large amount of money spent on a gifted and talented program. But I also offer to you, after over 40 years in education, that very, very precocious children are special needs children. Not only because they need the academic stimulus, but they also may need socialization as well. And as part of this overall scheme of improving schools, let's try to serve everybody, including those who have the need to not be bored to tears because they're so far ahead of the rest of their classmates.
My number one priority when I deal with education is I want to ensure that every child gets the opportunity to get a quality education. And I don't hate very many things, but I hate economic discrimination among schools. And unfortunately, that happens a lot of places around the country. And in Keene, basically, it doesn't matter where you live, you're going to get a quality education. And I think that is critical, and I think Keene should be proud of that. The second thing about Keene, with the school districts, is basically like tonight, the PTA and the principals. You guys are all married to your schools, you care for your schools. Again, there's a lot of communities around the country where you drop your kid off in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon and just view the schools as a babysitter. So again, the working relationship, the closeness between the schools and the parents, that's something that's working really well and we need to be proud of. What's going wrong? I really have concern for the middle 70% of our children. We take care of our special need children pretty well. We take care of our kids in the AP and honors very well. We have a lot of kids in the middle that need to be challenged. They need to go home and feel like at the end of the school day that they counted, they mattered, and people noticed they were in school. And to me, I think that is really critical. We cannot just say, hey, they went through school today, they didn't cause any trouble, that was a good day. We can't do that. We have to challenge every child.
My daughter had the opportunity of spending the first semester at Keene High School before she went on to homeschool. And she has reported that it was a big improvement from the other high school that she just left in Tennessee. She said it's freer, the teachers are more relaxed and they're more friendly and they're more, the children are more confident. And I've had the opportunity myself to walk the halls, and I've seen, I'm an artist, I sculpt, and I've seen the murals and the paintings on the walls, and it makes me feel good that the younger generation are so creative, and and that's one of the reasons why I like Keene so much. But when you consider the tuition and the cost of education that has to go into it, and all the people who are hurt, where could that money be spent in other ways? I mean, it's hurting so much of the community that even the creative talent that I see, at the end of the day, it doesn't add up. And another problem that I see is that we as parents don't have the option to opt out. So, I'm homeschooling my daughter, and I'm still being taxed almost, more than 50% of my property tax is going to pay the schools that I'm not using, I'm not utilizing. And so I'm hurt even more. The property taxes are hurting, and now I'm having to fund and take care of my kid on my own, and because I've decided that the high school is not for her.
I have to disagree with Daryl, just because people are, in our current system, people are forced to pay for schools, whether they like them or not, and the schools get the money whether they do a good job or not. But I think that in the absence of that force, in the absence of the coercion that makes the whole system immoral, I don't think that means that people that don't have kids, like myself, wouldn't give to schools. In fact, I gave recently to a school that's just down the street from me because I value education, and I can see the value in having young people being raised with good education. It adds to the workforce later on. All kinds of good things come from good education. And I think we'd have better education without the monopoly system that we have. But as far as things that are right, the teachers, I mean, the men and women that come into the schools every single day to do their best within the system that they're essentially stuck with, to do their best to educate the kids that are coming to them on a daily basis. I think they do the best they can, and I think that the teachers should be set free of this one-size-fits-all system to where they would truly be able to innovate curriculum that they otherwise might be prohibited from instituting by federal mandates or state mandates or all these different rules and regulations that come down on, from on high. Decisions should be made at a grassroots level from the ground up, and it's the teachers that are on the ground.
I think what's working well in our schools is first of all, our teaching staff. We have excellent teachers in our buildings. They work diligently. I've said that over and over, so I'll just say it once more. I think secondly, we also do well in involving the community in the life of our schools. It's really an incredible community. I moved here 4 years ago, and I'm just amazed at the support and the wonderful support that the community gives our schools. What can be improved on? I think that the leadership at the central administration level is the most important area the district needs to improve on. Last year, the SAU 29 board hired a consultant to look at the leadership structure in the SAU. The report was published in June 2012 and concluded that there are long-standing overall leadership issues in the SAU, including fragmentation and confusion about roles and responsibilities. Leadership issues at the central administration level are a pressing issue for the board and the district. The second thing I think we have to work on is developing a common understanding in the organization of what makes schools work well, what good teaching looks like, and how demanding the work is. During last January's workshop day, a young man I didn't know, but later learned was a highly effective teacher, approached me and said he hoped I'd run for the school board. He looked at me with a kind of pleading and said, and I quote, "They," and he meant the school board, "don't know what we do. They don't know how their decisions affect us." This is a theme I hear often, and so I've learned that it's very hard to understand the nature of teaching if you've never worked in a school. Teaching, like law, medicine, and engineering, is a profession that requires rigorous training and a very specific set of wide-ranging skills if it's to be done well. Teachers need to be accorded the same respect in our society and community that we give to doctors, lawyers, and engineers.
I'll be quick and short to the areas of improvement. I think as a district we struggle with math, and I think it's something that we need to take a strong look at and see how we can move forward with that. I also think that you did hit on it a little bit, and it's a work in progress, and I'm glad to say that we've made some great gains in leadership in the SAU. You know, we changed our structure from 2 co-superintendents to a superintendent and 2 assistant superintendents below like we had in the past. That allows the leadership and the superintendent to start having a vision instead of always being in the day-to-day minutia, and allowing the co-superintendents to really start taking over their roles. And we've hired one, and Ruben Duncan, who's done an excellent job for town. He's going to be for the towns and also for curriculum, and then we're in the process of hiring the second one, and we're pretty excited about the candidates that have come forward. The reason I want to quickly on this is because there's so much good going on in the school district, and it's really important for people to know that whether it's, you know, it starts with the staff. You know, you go into Amy Strong's classroom, and it's an amazing thing. It's like going to camp and learning at the same time. You don't even know you're learning. She just brings it out of you. You go and you can see in Mrs. G's class at Franklin that there's this excitement with the kids about learning, and you look at their scores and you see an improvement. I can go school to school and say what is magical about this place. These people are dedicated staff. They come in, they want to improve, and we have to do whatever we can to allow that to happen. The best example is that there's a thing called, in 3rd grade, there's a thing called Keene Comes Alive. And it's a program that I helped start a few years ago, and but really Tom Sullivan at Fuller School really developed a curriculum that goes across, and it's about learning about your city and about the history of your city. And you have art teachers, music teachers, media specialists. Everybody's come together. And at the end of the year, we have an incredible show where actors come out and they present. They pick these prominent characters from Keene, and it says to me everything about what's good about this district.
I say, to really sum it up very quickly, that is that Keene school system doesn't have a spending problem. It has a revenue problem. The revenue, just like the state doesn't really have a spending problem either. It doesn't have enough revenue to do the work. I think we need more revenue from the state in order to run our schools properly. And that's basically it. Thanks.
We just need to take a quick break for just the video.
Sorry. It's okay. No, that was perfect. I lost track of time. Oh my God. Somebody text her. No, we had your phone number. I can't get this open. Why can't I get that one? Oh.
The next question is that has been referred to that there's currently the Keene School District is in the process of hiring assistant superintendent. And I was wondering if anybody had any comments on, and I'm not looking for specific personality comments or, but in general, what they think of the structure of the school district currently, what could be done better there. Do you think that it's working now, or how could it be improved? What would you do?
As I mentioned previously, I think that top-down level of control is one of the worst ways to run an organization. And so, I mean, I'm in favor of cutting out all administrators, state, federal, local. I think the schools should be self-contained, they should be self-operating. If they need to have administration, then that should be something they should decide on their own. But I thought it was interesting what Susan said earlier about someone contacting her and saying, you know, the school board just doesn't understand what goes on. And that's typical of central control. The school board, and you know, bless them, they do care and they want what's best for the kids, but they can only spend so much time and they can only know so much about what's going on. And similarly, the people of the state government know even less than the school board members do. And the people of the federal government don't know anything at all about what's going on here. So the more of those layers that we can cut off, the more free teachers will be to develop their own curriculum and the staff at each school to customize according to what the parents want.
As probably is clear by now, I'm a very great believer that leadership is important, and I think our district needs the kind of leadership that can create a culture of trust and teamwork within the organization. It needs a kind of leadership that can engage all stakeholders in the decision-making process and can model open and clear communication up and down the organization and build positive relationships with co-workers and staff. Needs the kind of leadership that has demonstrated the ability to be a competent manager, to get things done and make the system work. And I also would appreciate leadership that's highly intelligent, has a depth of educational knowledge, and holds firm educational beliefs. We need leadership that can have the respect of teachers and principals and co-workers, and leadership that would be able to create and implement a shared positive vision for the district. This person, or the kind of leadership we need, would be able to, along with an administrative team, inform, advise, and guide the school board, and me as a school board member, about what district goals and educational policies should be.
Historically, you know, for people that may not know, we had a superintendent that, for whatever reasons, was in the midst of her term let go. And because of that, we had two assistant superintendents that were thrusted into a co-superintendent role. Both of them newish in their job. And to say that they held us together for a period, for the time they had to, is being nice. And then we really knew, as an SAU, we knew we had to change the model, and we had to go back, and we as a SAU really looked into it and listened to the consultants, and we went with the model we've had in the past: an assistant, two assistants, a superintendent, and two assistants, and it's working. It's working. We're not there yet. We're not there yet because we have to get this other one on. We've changed, actually. The HR person we used to have used to be the head of, and now it's going to fall underneath the superintendent's role. We've changed, we've downsized somewhat on how we have certain players in certain roles. We are taking a strong initiative on that, because, and that allows us to have more visionary work going on by the superintendent. I just quickly want to say, too, that when you look at cuts, you should also think about how to generate revenue, and we have been able to do that. We went out and reached out to Sullivan and Gilsum students because they passed through our town to go to another school, and we said, come to Keene. Sullivan decided to come, and by doing that, it's a win for the students in my mind, but it's also a win for us because it generates revenue. We're looking at sports and how we can offset costs there. And we're setting up standards around capital funds that could be used for other things like arts. You know, so if people donate, maybe we can create a capital fund for arts, and we can have that money then roll over year to year, and then we can utilize it when we need to. We need to think differently than we have in the past. And we need to come up with ideas that will support us as we see our revenue decline. And so that I just don't, I keep looking at this, I hate the time. But am I there?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay, I keep going.
The superintendent should be a visionary, a person who really has a vision of where the school system needs to be going. The other big skill they need is to be able to communicate those ideas, both by listening and speaking. And if it works, maybe this model doesn't work. Maybe if you are president of a college, his responsibility would be to generate income. I don't know whether the superintendent of a school can generate income or not. It's possible. Thank you.
I believe that every parent should be the superintendent of their child's education. I don't think that a school district should hire a high-priced administrator to be given the title superintendent. As Ian said, the more layers of bureaucracy you have, the less it works and the less they actually know about what's going on. Mark Twain had a quote that said, "I never let my schooling get in the way of my education." And I believe in that wholeheartedly, and I believe that parents should have much more of a say about the actual education of their child than they currently have about the schooling of their child.
With all due respect to Wayne, I think this opportunity to hire a new superintendent when Wayne retires is a major opportunity for this city. When you think about it, it's one of the most important positions in this entire city of Keene. It oversees an operation of over $62 million a year. Our children's welfare depends upon it, the teachers' careers depend upon it, and the taxpayers' dollars are tied into it. So I think we need to hire a superintendent who is, number one, a good administrator. Someone who's going to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the work is done properly in the way we would all want it done. I think that's fundamental. Number two, I would hope we're going to hire a superintendent who comes from a previous experience of success. By that I mean I don't want somebody who's going to be a superintendent who's going to be learning on the job particularly. I want them to come in with ideas and with success under their belt who can then help us all raise the boast of this school district. Without boasting, because of my job, I've been in some of the best school districts according to statistics in the United States. I've been in New Trier High School in Illinois, I've been in Barrington, I've been in Annalee Stevenson, I've been in Chagrin Falls, and a bunch of others. And every one of those had tied together, had one thing in common, an atmosphere of excellence. The minute you got there, you knew it. And so I think most of all, we need a superintendent who's going to be a leader. And there's a difference between a leader and an administrator. I know you've probably had some great ones in the Corps. I was in the service for 33 years, and we had some commanders who came in, and immediately they had respect. They didn't have to demand it or push it. They got it. And they raised us all to believe that we could do, if not the impossible, close to it, simply by the example they set and by the encouragement they gave us. And I think that's what a real superintendent can do for us.
One thing I learned in the Marine Corps, there is no shared responsibility. You can delegate authority, but you can't share responsibility. I thought it was a mistake to have co-superintendents because it comes to the question is, who's responsible for the decision if you have two equal people? And so I'm glad that we're going back to the one superintendent. Right now, I would not be looking to hire an assistant superintendent. I'd be looking to hire a superintendent. Basically, we should be going out there looking for a superintendent, bringing him or her in to fill the assistant superintendent to find out how they get along with Keene. So if they don't get along with Keene, we don't waste 3 years by bringing him or her as a superintendent. We did it before, I think, with Phil. Phil was an assistant superintendent for Phil McCormick for a year and then moved on to superintendent. So we knew what we were getting, so it was giving them an opportunity to display their abilities. And the third part is, I don't look as a superintendent as being a top-notch administrator. That's why you have assistant superintendents to do the top-notch administration and doing the day-to-day things. The superintendent is the one who has to get out to the parents, to the students, to the school board. He or she has to be neutral, but also has to be the great compromiser, which again would be leadership, so everybody understands where it's going. Phil McCormick did that a number of times on some of when we had contract negotiations and it was looking pretty bad, or we had problems with teachers and the school board. So that's what a real top-notch superintendent should be doing. That's a leader.
I'm not in favor of one centralized planner making all the decisions for every school in the district. I think it's too much work for one man. I would rather each school be its own entity, where the teachers and the parents are in charge of whatever curriculum, whatever classes, whatever is going down. I think that should be in their hands. But if I absolutely had to have some head guy in charge, I would want someone who was seriously interested in bringing education into the 21st century. Because it seems to me that schools are still being run like they were 100 years ago. And I see kids on their own walking around with iPads and smartphones, and you have these wonderful programs online. You have Wikipedia, and you have Rosetta Stone, these wonderful programs that people can use to educate themselves, and it doesn't seem like the schools are taking advantage. Distant learning is a great example of having the best math teacher in the world teaching hundreds of thousands of kids throughout the world online. But we have to pay for, one math teacher to take care of 100 or so students. And, this is, it's 2013, the children are learning differently. The jobs require a different type of education. It's not 100 years ago. We need to grow up.
Assuming that you're all elected, or assuming if you were to be elected to the school board and you serve a term, at the end of that term, what would you like to look back on as being your greatest accomplishment in your service on the board? I'll start with Kris Roberts.
Three years from now, 2016, if I had look back at my greatest accomplishment, is some of the things that I put some bills up at the State House is basically to make us into the 21st education. Dual enrollment, contracting with colleges so children can get high school credit and college credit at the same time, saving their parents a great deal of money. Yes, we're improving technology, but we also have a lot of children that don't have access to technology. We have to find a way that we can give everyone access to technology. I have 5 iPads in my house for my grandkids and everything, and we have people around here who still have 53K dial-up. So that's what we need to do. We need to improve the technology, and we need to be able to come with individual lesson plans for every child and have a way to do it. Some of it will be online, some will be in the classroom, and we may have some children who will go to school all online. There's a school in Pennsylvania, K through 12, which is all digital, and they're producing great outcomes. Again, we have to come up with these opportunities to take advantage of the improving education.
I would like my greatest accomplishment as a board member to be the knowledge that I've given every parent in this city the ability to make their own decisions for their children in the way that they would want, and to raise their children in the way that they would want. Right now, the cookie cutter mold is the only option. If you you don't like the cookie cutter mold, you can go homeschool, or you can send your kid to a charter school or a private school, but then you're out of those funds, and you're paying for the funds to go to the rest of the community. I want every parent to have the option to make their own choices in how they choose to educate their children, and not be forced to go along with everyone else.
Well, I've had this particular situation as I was on the board for 3 years and left and had the chance to look back. And I think a quick answer would be, of course, the building of the middle school that I and others played a role in. And it's going to be there for a long while. And I was there on opening day just to watch the students walk in and see the looks on their faces. And it was really a great moment in my life to see that. But looking back, I'm proud of other things equally as well. I'm proud of the fact, small though it might be, that when I was the liaison to Franklin School, for the 2 years I was there, I went to just about every single parent meeting. And I did the same thing when I was here at Jonathan Daniels School. In short, I tried to be their school board member and showed up. And more than that, I think I've always tried to keep my word, and my word was this: I'm going to tell you exactly the way it is. And you may not like to hear it, but I hope you're going to appreciate somebody doing it for you.
There are 3 things that I would like to accomplish, assuming that I'm elected to the school board. Those 3 things are, first, parents, I want you to have more control over the education of your children. Second, taxpayers, I want your tax bill to be lower. And third, I want the education budget to be smaller.
And after everybody answers this question, we'll consider a couple of questions from the audience. So if you'd like to submit them for writing, or if you'd like to stand up, just get ready for that in a couple of minutes.
So if I were elected after the 3 years, realistically, I don't expect this entrenched school system that we currently have to change according to some of the ideas I'd like to bring to the table. So at the very least, I'd like to bring some fresh ideas to the table as we've been talking about decentralization and giving more control to the actual people that run the schools, the teachers, and the rest of the staff at each school. But I was told that that's illegal. So I imagine that if I were to actually get any traction with that idea, the lawyers would come in and try to put a stop to any kind of changes like that. So at the very least, it would bring something new to the table as far as ideas, and maybe that could result in some changes down the line. Because I agree that this system is old, it's antiquated, and that students and teachers shouldn't be saddled with this one-size-fits-all system. It needs to be decentralized.
At the end of a third-year term, I would like to see our school district unified, united, characterized by mutual respect among everyone who works here. I would like to see teacher morale high. I would like to see us able to attract and maintain the highest quality of teachers and professionals that are available.
When a child walks through that door, I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to reach their excellence, and whatever that means. I want to see that when they walk across the stage and receive their diploma, that we have prepared them to be successful, contributing, and valued members of our community, and that we taught them to be lifelong learners. That they are hungry to go out there and make better for themselves. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that I would love to see, separate from what I just said, I'd love to see us come up with ideas on some of the cuts that we talked about tonight. The gifted and talented, the person that teaches it is a certified elementary school teacher. Are there openings in the elementary school? Would that be a safer bet if you had somebody like that in our school system that wasn't low-hanging fruit, as we say on the board? Let's think differently than we have in the past, like I've said before, and come up with ideas that maybe, if we hired somebody and they had that talent, then they'd be here all the time. They'd be teaching, And same goes for the foreign language. Is there a way that we can do it right? right is what you said earlier. Start it earlier, even if we can only go to second grade, but start it early and come up with ideas on how we can fund that and what would that mean. Because it's the right thing to do. But I go back to what I said before. Let's reach every child and make sure that they come out of here with their academic excellence.
At the end of my first term, I would like to wonder by a class of kindergartners speaking Chinese.
Are there any questions from anyone in the audience at all? Okay.
Hi. I was going to ask everybody on the panel, do you think that if, like, the 60-something million that's spent on education every year, do you think if that's cut, will it necessarily hurt the students' education?
The question was if the $62 million budget is cut significantly, will that hurt education? Basically, that's your question? Okay. Anybody would like to take that? Kris?
The people that know me know that I'm pretty tight with the dollar, and I have no problem spending money if I know it's going to be a positive outcome, but I'm not going to spend money for the sake of spending money. And I'll tell you straight from my heart is we can't cut any more from this budget without hurting the quality of education. This is a really tight budget. When you look at it, almost $2 million of this increase is the result of things that were either contract or outside our control, whether it was retirement or whether it was healthcare costs. We're requiring our employees to pay more in healthcare. The state is requiring them to pay more, and so some people have gotten pay raises, but they're actually bringing less home because, for example, some have increased 4% of their pay. 4% more of their pay has to go to the state retirement, and they have to pay more for health care. We really, really cut this budget, and so if we want to cut more, we're going to go right to the bone, and we're going to decrease the quality of education in Keene.
I could not disagree more. As I stated earlier, if you look at the $62.3 million proposed budget and break that down by the 3,788 students that are enrolled in the Keene School District, that's nearly $9,000 per year per child, which is roughly $3,000 or 3 times as much. And the $9,000, that's just the instructional cost, which is the $33.6 million of the budget. The entire $62.3 million budget broken down by the students is nearly $17,000 per year per child, which is almost 6 times as much as what private schools are able to educate a child for. So do I believe that children can get a quality education at much less than $62.3 million? Absolutely. Do I believe that children can be educated without theft of property tax? Absolutely. Because we teach children that stealing is wrong, but somehow it's not wrong when it's done by a collective known as government.
Anybody else want to?
I think we're looking at the question the wrong way. And that's because we've got everything set up with, okay, everybody puts a bunch of money in this centralized pot, and then each year that number goes up. It doesn't matter what's happening to the individuals that are putting the money in. So as mentioned previously, a lot of people in private jobs have had to take cuts. I know in my business, the radio business, there was one company that went to all their employees and said, look, if you want to keep your job, you're going to have to take a 5% cut. That's no fun. But that's what the real world is, where people are cutting back. Government doesn't have to do that because every year they can just keep taking more and more. And really, they don't really ever see the real consequence of it, because the consequence is going to be that more families, especially younger families, are going to move out of Keene. And that's already happening to some extent. It's very cost prohibitive to live in a place like this where, on my $200,000 home, which probably isn't worth that anymore, but that's what I paid for it, it's $6,000 a year. I come from Florida, where the property taxes there were much lower. They spent even less per pupil in their school system. But regardless, if parents were able to keep the money that they earned and decide where to send that money, it would completely change how much education costs, because then you would have different schools in the area that would be competing for various different students, instead of them all just being funded by this centralized bureaucracy that determines from on high who gets what. It should be the parents who determine who gets what, which schools get how much for their kids, what's the most valuable curriculum. If you work at it from that perspective, costs will come down, just as they do in a lot of the industries where there's not tremendous amounts of regulation. Look at the computer world, for instance. Very, very low regulation. The computers keep getting cheaper. They keep getting better over time. Shouldn't education be the same way? It keeps getting cheaper, keeps getting better. There's no reason why it shouldn't be, except for the fact that government runs it.
I don't believe we can cut any more money from our programs and have quality education.
We had the question asked at the first session, and had we gone with the 10% cut, you were looking at devastation. And I said it then, and I'll say it again. You're looking at 100 teachers, because teachers are probably the cost, if you have to reach a certain goal, the ones that you're going to hit. I think this budget session was hard enough, and we had to come up with solutions. And if you went any deeper, it would have been even more critical.
The answer is no.
Are there anybody else with here other question? Any other questions from the audience? Misty? So I guess would like now to have each candidate state why you'd like why you'd like the public to vote for you, and anything else you feel like you'd like to say in wrapping this up. Start with John.
Why should you vote for me? I care. I have a pretty sound mind. I reason well. I have done on other boards, made impressive transformations of those boards. And I believe in public education.
I hope you vote for me. I love the opportunity to serve. I've had it's some of the hardest work, volunteer work I've ever done. But I think we've made some gains, and I think we can continue to make some gains. With that said, let my rest of my time. It's not very often you get to say thank you to somebody, and it's because she's in the audience tonight. She's going to hate me for it. When I was 10, on my 10th birthday, my dad passed suddenly. If it wasn't for my 4th grade teacher, I don't think I'd be here today. So I don't very often get to say thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Corbo.
I think I'm informed about the issues and familiar with the issues that face the board and the district. I think I'm knowledgeable about education. I know what it takes to create quality schools that strive to meet the needs of all children. And I know what constitutes the inspired teaching that enables children to become joyful and confident learners. I'm invested. I can't imagine a better place to live and raise children than Keene. I want to help keep our schools strong because I believe strong schools are the underpinnings of a vibrant community. I have some personal qualities that I think would make me a good board member. I have the ability to work collaboratively with others. I'm a careful listener. And I believe that seeking divergent opinions before coming to a conclusion or reaching a decision is the best way to reach consensus.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and listening. Appreciate it. The system that we currently have today, and it's not just in Keene, it's everywhere in this country, the system that we currently have is both impractical and it's also inefficient, but it's also immoral. And I think that it's important to come from a place of what's right when you're doing something. And it's never right to, no matter how good your intentions are, and the intention to educate children is a really good intention, it's never right to threaten one's neighbors in order to see your intentions become real. And the system that we have, not through any of our faults, is a coercive one. It's one wherein people are threatened if they don't wish to participate. And I would never want to force any of my neighbors to pay for anything that I think is important. And I don't think that anyone else should be forced, should force anyone to pay for the things they think are important. If it's a good idea, and education is a good idea, people will pay for it on a consensual basis, just like they do with everything else. Thanks for listening.
The question is, why should you vote for me? I'm actually going to answer this sort of in the opposite way, and I'll tell you why you should not. If you want to see the budget of the school board continue to go up, don't vote for me. If you want to see your taxes continue to go up, don't vote for me. If you want to see your control over your child's education diminish, don't vote for me. There are 3 people up here who have fresh ideas. If you want to see fresh ideas on the Keene School Board, you can figure out which 3 of those people it is that you should vote for. And I'll just remind you again of the Mark Twain quote, "Never let schooling get in the way of education."
First, I share Ian's thanks to you, all of you, for coming out tonight. It was great to have an audience to speak to. And thank you all, the other candidates, for showing up and giving up your time. And I will say this, and I'll take probably more than 1 minute, but when you have 3 positions open and you have 8 people running, I think that says a lot about the town, and I think it says a lot about the people who are willing to give up, and it's not for the money that we're up here, I assure you. With all due respect to all the discussion about budget and money and the rest of it, I keep coming back to the fact that the name of the group is the school board. I can do budget, but I'm an educator, and I want to be on the school board and hope you'll vote for me because that's where my heart and my interests are. I think the money should be spent for something, and that something should be the outstanding schools that we have in the town. That's the goal of all of this. And I have the experience and the will, and I've always pushed for having the best schools we possibly can, and I can work with the administrators and the other board members. I can't guarantee it'll be perfect, but you have my word. I will give it everything I have.
I hope that you vote for me because when I look at something, I look at it quite different than a lot of other people. We've been talking about taxes and paying for education. Well, on an average $200,000 house, you pay $2,400 in taxes. So we who own our houses, we really don't pay for our education for our children. It's the businesses around Keene that pay for our education. They want to be in Keene. They want the people to get educated. When you stop and realize $2,400 per year for a $200,000 house, and you maybe have 2 or 3 children, we're not paying. You can't go get an education for one of your children at $2,400, let alone $1,200 or $800. And so I'm looking for the future. I'm looking for the best way possible. I'm a visionary, and I want to be able to do what's best for the future.
Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak. For those of you who are sick and fed up with this out-of-control spending of our government schools, for those of you who have lost faith in the system that continues to grow every single year, and yet the achievement scores of our children have remained stagnant over the years, and the student population is declining, I'm here to tell you that there are other options. But we have to take care of them now. We can't keep kicking this bucket down the road for the next 10, 20 years. I encourage you to come out the 12th and vote for me for real change and not more of the same. Thank you.
So it's 8:03, so we've kept in our time constraints. I believe that everybody who's here is going to be staying around for a little while if you want to ask anybody questions one-on-one. There's also massive amounts of home-baked chocolate cookies over there beckoning. And I'd like to thank everybody in the PTAs for setting this up. We had over 50 people in attendance, which is really pretty good. It's half the amount of people who came to the first session to vote on the budget. So Anyway, thank you to everybody for stepping up to run for the school board, and thank everybody for attending.
Nice meeting you.